Hello and thanks for staying on LN 24/7. This is Politics Now. My name is Morno Balagubo. Sit back, relax. We've got quite a packed show for you today. But let's first tell you that President Bola Tinubu is in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil to attend the 19th Heads of State and Government Summit of the Group of 20. President Tinubu is also expected to hold bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the summit in advance of Nigeria's socio-economic reforms. Mr. Lula da Silva, president of Brazil, is hosting the 2024 G20 summit, having held the group's rotating presidency since the 21st of December 2023, but his tenure ends this November. The summit, with the theme Building a Just World and a Sustainable Planet, will focus on three dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental, and the reform of global governance. It will also highlight the rising of global temperatures and the principles of the digital economy, amongst other themes. The Brazilian presidency will also treat as priorities the Israel-Hamas war and rising bloc confrontation between the United States and China. And we also learned that conversations will focus around Trump's presidency, of course, in the light of his re-election as the 47th president of the United States. Well, the deputy spokesperson for the House of Representatives, Mr. Philip Agbese, has disclosed that some state governors are threatening to deny federal lawmakers return tickets in the 2027 general elections if they do not withdraw their support for President Bola Tinubu's tax reform bills now before the National Assembly for consideration. Agbese also disclosed that lawmakers will, of course, engage the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal and Tax Reforms, Taiwo Oyedele, and other renowned tax experts on the bills. Now, this is not surprising. Do recall on this show, several times I made mention of the fact that governors are going to challenge this because these senators, these lawmakers are in their states, and definitely they do have a say. So this war is really not over. Well, of course, it was quite interesting yesterday. Nigeria and India signed a series of agreements to foster collaboration in defense and economic development for food security and health care, even energy. The agreements were sealed during the state visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Nigeria at the invitation of President Bola Tinubu. During their bilateral discussion, the two leaders agreed to a greater collaboration in counter-terrorism, maritime security, and intelligence sharing. Prime Minister Modi reiterated Nigeria's readiness to support Nigeria's defense modernization efforts, highlighting India's emergence as a trusted defense manufacturer. And on bilateral trade expansion, both leaders directed their officials to finalize spending agreements, including the Economic Cooperation Agreement, Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement, and the Bilateral Investment Treaty to boost trade and investment. Tinubu and Modi also discussed broader collaboration on food security, agriculture, health, education, cultural exchanges. And on food security, they agreed that it remains a priority for developing countries, especially with bigger populations, to come together and, of course, find a way forward. And on healthcare, Nigeria and India pledged to deepen their collaboration, focusing on the establishment of hospitals and diagnostic centers, as well as the deployment of innovative health management system. This is a very much welcome development, given the technology that India has to offer our nation. And of course, it's really exciting to see leaders come together. But the PDP is not really happy about conferring honors to the Prime Minister. But that's not our focus tonight. Well, today on the show, we'll be looking at national economy matters arising. Quite a lot of things is happening in our country when you look at the economy. But our focus will be on the 2025 budget, proposed 47.9 trillion budget. Those are the figures being proposed by FEC. We won't get into all the nitty-gritty of making sense of what has been proposed. We'll also look at the state's rising debt profile. What's the way forward? Governors across the state have focused in borrowing But how sustainable is that given the rise of FAC allocations? And we'll look at inflation at 33.88%. Our analysts will be helping us to make sense of how Nigerians are coping and what government can do. Joining us today, Dr. Samson G. Simon. He's an economist, the chief economist, ARC Economics and Data Limited, member Nigerian Economic Society, Royal Economic Society, and the American Economic Association. So Doc will be helping us make sense of all that is going on in our economy. Also, we have Patrick Asoma. He's a business consultant and seasoned management professional, also helping us make sense on the conversation. So we'll take a quick breather. When we come back, we'll go straight into conversations regarding the proposal for the budget for the year 2025. So stay with us. Good to have you once again. The Federal Executive Council, FEC, unveiled a proposed budget of 47.9 trillion naira for the 2025 fiscal year. Atiku Bagudu, the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, disclosed this to journalists on Thursday last week following the Federal Executive Council meeting that was chaired by President Bola Tinubu. Now, Bagudu revealed that the council had approved the medium-term expenditure framework MTEF for 2025 to 2027. And according to the minister, the government has pegged the crude oil benchmark at $75 per barrel with an oil production target of 2.06 million barrels per day. The budget also sets the exchange rate at 1,400 naira per dollar and aims for a gross domestic product of 6.4%. Now, let's take a look at some infographics to get the breakdown of the budget. From your screen, you can see that the federal government targets 34.8 trillion naira, which is further broken down into oil revenue, 19.6 trillion, non-oil taxes, 5.7 trillion, net revenues from goes to 2.87 trillion, and of course, independent revenue of 3.6 trillion, and others 4.8 trillion. Then on the expenditure, you see 47.9 trillion for the period. For non-debt expenditure, that's 14.2 trillion, and then aggregate capital, 16.4 trillion, and of course, debt servicing of 15.38 trillion, and others are 2 trillion. Well, in a bid to raise hopes on getting the economy back on track, Nigeria's Vice President Shettima predicted that the country's economy will grow in leaps and bounds come 2025. There seems to be quite the excitement regarding the year 2025. Well, he's made the prediction on Saturday, citing improvements recorded so far, including crude oil production reaching 1.8 million barrels per day. Let's have a listen to what the Vice President had to say.
The President is determined to change the pace of the nation and the economy. The security of lives and property of the citizenry is you, the younger ones, that will be saddled with the task of piloting the ship of the state. And we want to bequeath to you a united, progressive Nigeria. Let's join hands. Let's work as a team. The economy is on an upward trajectory. And in the new year, we believe hope springs eternal from the hearts of men. I believe in the new year, the economy will grow in leaps and...
Now, well, recently, Nigeria's debt to GDP ratio rose to 55% as of June 2024, marking a significant increase from 42.4% in December 2023. This is based from data from the Debt Management Office, which indicates that Nigeria's external debt now stands at $42.9 billion, while its domestic debt has risen to 71.2 trillion. Now, do recall the Federal Executive Council approved 2.2 billion external debt borrowing plan last Thursday as part of the government's 2024 Appropriation Act financing program. According to the finance minister, the borrowing plan includes a mix of financial instruments, $1.7 billion from Eurobonds and $500 million from Sukuk offerings. Edwin stated that the allocation between these instruments will depend on market conditions and recommendations from transaction advisors pending approval by the National Assembly. Well, our guest, Dr. Simon, joins us from Abuja. Patrick will be with us shortly, but let's get to Doc. Okay, Doc, good to have you. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I'm sure you've examined the proposed budget, looking at how the 2024 budget was managed. What are your concerns as you and your colleagues in the world of economics have been, giving their reactions about this particular proposal? Has FEC learned his lessons?
I've looked at the proposed budget by the current president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and it seems ambitious. If you look at it in nominal terms, 47.9 trillion is a new one. We have never had a budget this big. And mind you, are coming from 28.7 trillion. So that's an increase of 3/4 compared to what we had, compared to the current budget of 2024, what we expected to have in 2025. But in real terms, we might not have moved an inch. In fact, this budget is even way smaller than the 2025 budget is way smaller than the 2024 budget, and is something in the region of half the size of the 2023 budget when you account for inflation and you account for exchange rate. Despite the budget being smaller in real terms, it will not be easy because some of the parameters, I don't know, we tend to be over optimistic. We tend to be over ambitious. We don't really seem to want to come down to earth, because if you look at the parameters, we're talking about 2.06 million barrels of crude oil a day. When was the last time they will produce 2 million barrels a day? I'm not saying it's completely impossible, but the chances are very slim and almost impossible. They're claiming that they're producing 1.8, which nobody has independently verified so far. But if we're going to use OPEC numbers, we're not producing up to 1.8, right? So that is not really realistic. But maybe for the price of crude oil at 75, that may seem a little bit realistic, considering the prices we have this year. So that possibility is there, at least that one is close to reality. But for the barrels, number of barrels, and then if you look at the exchange rate, we're talking about 1,400. We're doing more than 1,600 now. So are we trying to say that the Naira is going to appreciate? Mind you, the current budget of 2024, they were projecting 700. So I don't know why we don't want to be realistic about these estimates sometimes. And the current budget, we're struggling to fund it. We in nominal terms, the revenue for the first half of this year increased by a third compared to the revenue for last year, 2023. But if you look at it compared to the projected revenue that they were expecting to make this year, they were underperforming by 2/3. So you cannot be struggling to fund the current budget at a budget of 28 trillion, then you're trying to do 47.9 trillion. I think what all of us want the government to spend to reflate the economy so that we see some growth, because largely we're struggling to experience growth. But we have to be realistic. And then if you look at even the growth rate that they're projecting for 2025 at more than 4.6%. This year they projected 3.76. We were not close to that. Even the IMF and the World Bank were projecting way lower, and eventually it came to as low as 2.9. So I know that maybe the last quarter, the growth was slightly more than 3%. But we have to be realistic. What exactly are we going to do different? What exactly do we think that will make us to feel that we're going to experience growth of more than 4.6%? So we have to be realistic. A budget is a plan. And when you have a plan, it has to be as close to reality as possible. Sadly, I don't think this particular budget is as close to reality, or the reality, as close to reality as possible, because the realities on ground do not actually seem like this budget is actually a document that should be taken seriously.
Thank you, Prof, for your thoughts. We'll come back to you shortly. Patrick Asuma joins us now from Lagos, Nigeria. Good to have you with us, Patrick. I'd like to get your thoughts regarding the targeted expenditure of 47.9 trillion for the period we're looking at 2025. You see recurrent non-expenditure at 14.2 trillion, aggregate capital expenditure 16.4 trillion, debt service of 15.38 trillion, and others at 2 trillion. So over to you, Patrick. What are your thoughts on that?
For me, looking at the targeted expenditure, it's one thing that I've noticed is that we overestimate things in this country. So for me, I feel that the current targeted expenditure, that the government are having, it's really not sustainable, honestly. It's really not sustainable because looking at the current revenue that is coming in, now the benchmark for revenue is placed at $75. And looking at the current war with Ukraine and Russia, which the current president of the United States that just came into power, is trying to ensure that there is peace. And once there is peace in that environment, definitely it's going to affect our revenue as a country. So the government needs to put most of these things into consideration whenever they are making budget. The president of the United States currently announced that he wants to ensure that there's a lasting peace within Russia and Ukraine, which the Russian president has also given a nudge that he's ready for a peace talk, so that this war can end. And if that war definitely ends, it will reduce the price of oil in the international market, which inherently is going to affect Nigeria's revenue generation. So for me, the government, having such an expenditure, the question is, this expenditure, is it sustainable? What are we seeing this expenditure, in active service, in terms of the development, in terms of the development. So for me, having such an expenditure, with the current, not even with the current, with the projection that they are having, it's not going to be sustainable. So that's just my own take on it. So I feel the government needs to go back and consider a lot of projection in the future, because this is for 2025, not for 2024. And by January 2025, the president of the United States will be sworn into office, which definitely means that if there is peace within Ukraine and Russia, it's going to affect our revenue, which influently might lead the government to even more borrowing, and it's going to increase our deficit. It's going to increase our debt profile, on the international market. So that is just my take on that. Thank you.
All right, Patrick. Now, talking about debt servicing, Dr. Simon, given the latest numbers, external debt now stands at 42.9 billion. Domestic debt, 71.2 trillion rather. So if you do the math, that's quite a lot, over 100 plus. So what is a healthy ratio for servicing our debts? Because this is always something that reoccurs in our proposals in terms of what we are using our money for. So what is a healthy ratio looking at this proposal?
They are projecting something in the region of 15 trillion for debt service and 16 trillion for capital expenditure. So if you look at, and for the current expenditure, non-debt is around 14 trillion. So if you look at it, if you juxtapose, it's technically using a third of the budget for capital expenditure, a third of the budget for the current non-debt, and then a third for debt service. That's not really a good ratio. What you're saying is that if you combine the recurrent, that means the debt and the non-debt recurrent, that's 2/3 of the budget. So you're just using a third of the budget for capital expenditure. What is advisable is that the larger chunk of your budget should go to infrastructure, should go to capital expenditure. And that's for a country that is serious about development. So sadly, with these numbers, we are not doing well. And like I mentioned earlier on, in real terms, these are in nominal terms, we seem to have a humongous budget, 47.9 trillion. But in real terms, meaning if you adjust for inflation, you adjust for exchange rate, this budget might actually be the worst or the smallest in recent times. So, and you're just using a tiny fraction of it for capital expenditure, particularly at the time now that you want Nigeria to be a $1 trillion economy. I think last year they were projecting in 3 years' time. This is 1 year already gone, 2 years ago. So I think they might have adjusted that because they realized that was not possible. But in all honesty, we really need to get our act together. Capital is very important. Infrastructure is very important. One reason why Nigeria is lagging, even let's look at food inflation, we've been struggling with that. And that's largely because agriculture is under-mechanized. We are still using hooves and cutlasses in 21st century to feed 230 million people. So Nigeria has one of the worst capital ratio compared to the population. It's one of the least in the world. And that means there's a need for us to mechanize our economy, to bring infrastructure. Talking about power, our power is still struggling despite the subsidy and so on. Talk about we're largely not there yet. And if we want to be there, if we want to be a serious economy, if we're serious about meeting our potential, then we need to pump a lot of money into capital projects. I know it's not only for the government to do that. They can come together with private sector and try to get some of these things done. But it still largely remains the responsibility of the government to arrive at some of these things. So they cannot just run away from their responsibilities. So there's a need for a lot of things to be done. And with the current budget, I don't think we're really serious about really meeting those needs that are ahead of us.
Right. Now, FEC has made it clear that the budget numbers can go up with exchange rate being pegged at 1,400. That doesn't look close to what we have at the moment. But Patrick, do you have concerns about whether if this could be jacked up?
For me, because FEC indicating that the proposed 47.9 trillion budget might definitely increase, raises a lot of significant concern. Number one, my key consideration would be escalating expenditure. Number one, when there's an increase beyond the already substantial 47.9 trillion budget, it will exacerbate physical imbalances, especially if not marked by corresponding revenue growth. So what it means is that if the revenue growth is not matching the expenditure, there will definitely be an imbalance, and it will snowball to a bigger problem. Then also we need to also look at another key consideration that has to do with deficit implication. So the current budget, they are proposing the sum of 13.8 trillion, which is about 3.78%, of the estimated GDP. So any upward adjustment in expenditure without enhanced revenue and widen the deficit gap, which will lead to increased borrowing and potential debt sustainability issues. So that's another key consideration, because now if this thing goes up, we have a lot of debt concerns for Nigeria. As of 2020, June this year, 2024, the total debt, public debt, stood at 87.3 trillion. Now, so further budget increase for this could necessitate additional borrowing, which in one way or the other is going to risk a lot of heightened debt stress for us as a country. And this is not what we want to do. Then we've not even talked about the issue of inflationary pressure. So government are, spending, having a lot of higher spending, especially in finances by borrowing, that can lead to increased money supply, potentially falling inflation. So we need to look at this. If they are saying they want to, that the figures might go up. Now, are they putting all this into consideration, which has to do with escalating expenditure, the deficit implication, the debt consign, the inflationary pressure that is coming? So any further spending hike would just definitely exacerbate the inflationary pressure, adversely affecting the entire economy. So what we are looking at is basically, for me, is a very big concern. So why strategic investment are essential for development? Any increase in this 2025 million must have to be carefully evaluated against revenue projection. Because if it's not done, definitely we are already in a mess, a very big mess. And we don't want to compound the mess that we are currently in. So if the government are to increase these budgets, they need to sit down and calculate what is the revenue projection. It's not about, the projection should not just be based on how they feel, or they should look at the global economic indices in terms of the Western world, in terms of how the global oil price will be affected, because that is basically our highest source of revenue. So they should look at that and ensuring that a sustainable budget requires balancing the expenditure with the realistic revenue forecast. Because right now they just come out, put certain figure, like they say they want to put they are benching the exchange rate at 1,004. As of today, exchange rate is supposed to be 1,700. Now you are saying 1,004. So invariably, I try to tell us down that you start supporting the dollar like this previous government used to do. It's no longer going to be free fall. If the dollar is going to be free fall, you cannot bench it at 1,400. What is the magic you want to do to ensure that you bring the exchange rate down? A unified exchange rate down to 1,400, which is not even open, is not an open market in which based on demand and supply. The market is not based on demand and supply. So what are the things? Because right now, a lot of these policies have failed in time past. So if you are to increase this, these are the key considerations for me that I feel the government needs to pay attention to. Because not just increasing it. First, what is our revenue projection? If you're increasing with the revenue projection that you have, match up with whatever you're increasing it to ensure that there's a balance in the economy. So that is just my take. Thank you very much.
Okay, I know Prof would want to share some thoughts on some of the things you touched on. But Prof, specifically, what is your thoughts on the borrowing plan being provided by the Minister of Finance? He talked about a mix of financial instruments, $1.7 billion from Eurobonds and $500 million from Sukuk offerings. Is that enough?
I think we have to be a bit careful. If you look at the current budget, the projected, 2025 budget, I have to be careful because we are still in 2024. If you look at the 2025 budget, the projected revenue is 34 trillion. And debt service is 15 trillion. That's what they're projecting. And if the 2024 budget is anything to go by, the revenue underperformed and the expenditure was above what they projected. So that possibility of this 2024 happening again is still there. But even at 15 trillion for debt service, 34 trillion for revenue, we are doing above what the World Bank would have recommended for an economy like ours. What is advisable is that debt service should not exceed 22.5%. And if you look at 15%, is something in the region of half, almost half of 34 trillion. So that's not really good. And if you're going to borrow some more, that means you have more debt service down the line. So I don't think we should be going above our means, even though borrowing could be necessary. And like we always advise that when you borrow, the debt should be in such a way that they should be able to pay for themselves, and in terms of the principal, in terms of the interest. So far, when almost everything is being expended on the current expenditure, you don't expect these debts to be able to pay for themselves down the line. So I think we're digging ourselves into a hole, and it's not really wise. We need to find ways. I understand that this oil revenue is the most important thing. It has been the mainstay of the economy until Muhammadu Buhari came on board. And the main reason why he struggled under the Buhari administration, and the problem is still persistent up to now, is because of oil theft. Oil theft has always been there. We really got out of hand on his watch. And up to now, the problem is persistent. So unless we tackle that problem, then oil output will continue to be below par and we'll struggle to fund our budget. And ways and means is not actually an option. It has destroyed the economy. And I know it's the easy way out, but we may be tempted to resort to ways and means when we struggle to fund the budget, just like the last administration did, and even the current administration did some months ago. So we have to be very circumspect. There's nothing wrong with borrowing, but we have to make sure that we have the fiscal space to get things done. But when we borrow, I think they were bragging that they have brought down debt service to revenue ratio compared to what they meant it. But the truth is, at the detriment of our national debt, the debt stock has increased. But now that they're aggressively borrowing too, then that celebration might not be, will likely be short-lived, because we'll reach a level, if we continue on this trajectory, that the debt service might wallop everything in terms of revenue.
All right, you're still watching Politics Now. We'll take a quick breather. When we come back, of course, Dr. Simon is still with us and Patrick Asuma from Lagos. We will continue our conversation, moving away from national debt this time around and examine what is going on within the states in the country. To stay with us.
What makes the political system what it is today? What are the recurring issues? The tussle for power.
An extremely problematic area.
The tension. The instability of the system. Join Ellen 24/7 as we take you inside the local and international political arena in the world of politics.
Apologize for saying that I'm corrupt. I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
Watch Politics Now on Ellen 24/7.
Don't miss Politics Now on Ellen 24/7.
Many thanks for staying with us. If you're just tuning in, we are focusing on the national economy. Let's give you a rundown of our talking points again. We're looking at the year 2025 in view and the 47.9 trillion naira budget and states' rising debt profile way forward, and also tackling inflation at 33.88%. Well, away from the federal government debt, the domestic debt of Nigeria's 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, increased by 198.96 billion naira within just three months. Now, the DMO data highlights a growing reliance on external borrowing among Nigerian states, driven by the need to fund large-scale infrastructure projects and critical services. Now, we've got a rundown of some of the top states who are highly indebted, whether to external or to internal. You see Katsina State at number 10. That's $112 million. That's quite a lot. Kano following, 123. Ekiti, $136 million. Ogun, $166 million. Bauchi State, 185. Rivers, 203. Cross River, 211. Edo, 380. I mean, almost $400 million. And I recall the incumbent governor complaining about Obaseki's debt profile. Well, you move away to Kaduna, you see $640 million. And Lagos, the chieftain of debt itself, with $1.2 billion. So let's get back to our guests now. Away from the federal level, states' debt, I mean, it's just really, really quite high despite FACO allocations. This question is for you, Patrick. Help us make sense of the figures we just saw.
Looking at the debt levels of most Nigerian states, despite increased allocation from the federation accounts, this calls for an approach to ensure physical sustainability and economic stability. Now, the current situation we have right now, as of June 2024, the combined debt of the 36 states stood at 11.47 trillion, marking a 14.57% increase from 10.1 trillion in December 2023. So for me, I just feel that the government needs to employ certain strategies in addressing this debt concern. Number one is diversifying revenue source. A lot of states, should explore alternative income stream beyond FAP. I am really happy that the president wants us to return to true federalism. So if that definitely happens, every state is going to sit up, because right now everybody is just waiting for Abuja to send money to them. Also they should also strengthen their tax administration. Implementing an efficient tax collection system, will broaden the tax base, and also can improve their revenue. And so that's for me in terms of enhancing internal generated revenue. So the government needs to do that. The state government needs to wake up to that, to ensure that, okay, it's not just about borrowing. Every state in this country is rich with natural resources. What are they doing with those natural resources? What are they doing with internal generated revenue? So they need to diversify. It's not just one. If it's not working, iterate and design another method, for you to generate revenue for your state. Then another thing is to implement fiscal discipline. So it's one of the challenges we have as a country. We don't have prudent expenditure management. I don't think there's any state in this country that has a prudent expenditure management. So states need to prioritize essential projects and eliminate wasteful spending. Imagine doing, white elephant projects, things that are not needed, that will not add any economic value to the state. Why are you doing it? Then another thing is transparent budgeting. It has been a problem in this country as a whole. We don't have any transparent budgeting. So we need to adopt, the state need to adopt a zero-based budgeting, that can help them align expenditure with actual need and available resources. It's not just putting in figures there, and, thinking that, oh, if you put this, it will work. It's not going to work. Then another thing, they need to adopt a sustainable debt practice. It's not everything you borrow for. Imagine borrowing to build an airport. How many people fly into your state on a monthly basis? Do you have that data? You are borrowing to build an airport. How many people use that airport on a monthly basis? There are some airports in this country that in a month, you don't have up to 20 flights. It's just the government, it's just the governor that makes use of it. It doesn't make sense. So they also need to have what we call debt restructuring. Can they negotiate these existing debt terms that can provide relief and create more manageable repayment schedules for them? These are things that the state government needs to start doing. It's not everything that has to come from the federal level. Then lastly, another thing that the government needs to also do is they also need to strengthen their financial oversight. Regular audits, capacity building. These are things that government needs to put in place to ensure that, okay, they are able to manage the resources that is given to them. Then lastly, they need to foster economic growth, infrastructure development. Government, since I was born, the only thing I hear in this country is road, provision of pipe and water. No government since I was born, no government in this country has ever said anything when they are campaigning or doing anything. The major thing is road. They are, so sometimes it baffles me that we are still living in this era after 60-something years as a country. We are still talking about providing road and clean water to people. It's a shame to us, it's a slap to our entire face. So the government should begin to think outside the box. Infrastructural development is key to stimulate economic activities and increase revenue. They should also need to support small and medium-sized enterprises, provide incentive and support SMEs that can boost local economies and expand the tax base. So by implementing these strategies, I feel this state debt issue can be addressed, and they should reduce dependency on FAC allocation. It's not everything, because like I said, I'm just praying, I'm just hoping and wishing that this true federalism come to full implementation so that every step is going to wake up. That means if you don't work, you won't eat. There's nothing for you. What it means is that whatever you generate, you send a portion to the federal. And if you don't send this month, you don't send next month, you have a debt to pay to the federal, and you must pay. So what it means is that every leadership that is going to come into office from the state will be thinking outside the box. How can I generate revenue? How can I optimize the current revenue I'm generating to ensure that, okay, we make more money? How can I reduce our expenditure? How can I reduce our spending? We spend so much money on things that are not necessary, that don't have any economic impact on the life of our people. So for me, servicing this debt in the state will, with these strategies and also with these strategies, will help to reduce the state's debt that we have and the dependency on FAC allocation.
All right, Dr. Simon, can you weigh in? You look at Lagos with a debt of $1.2 billion. How can this be managed, and will true federalism work, given the fact that some states in the north were complaining and threatening about VAT and threatening President Tinubu, giving threats to some lawmakers in their state?
Right, starting with Lagos, I think it's more than obvious that Lagos is by far the largest economy when you look at the Nigerian states, only 36 states, including the FCT. And it has largely done well for itself. And it's not surprising if they have the largest debt burden. Compared to other states, what they have is quite humongous, right? But I think what really matters is how they have used all these borrowings. Have they been using them well? I don't have proof to say if they have effectively been using the borrowings that they have embarked upon over the years. But Lagos has potential, and if they are going to make the most of their resources, if they are going to make the most of the revenue. Sometimes they like bragging that they generate more than 50 billion naira every month. And that's more than 600 billion in a year. That's a lot of money. For many states, is a lot of money. But how effectively have they been using these amounts, these revenues that have been coming in? I remember a particular journalist asking the governor of Lagos, and the answer was not really convincing. So I think they need to be very efficient. They need to be targeted. They need to make sure that whatever revenue they generate is well expended to the benefits of the people of Lagos. And whatever they're borrowing should not only be used for jamborees and things that may not even add value to the people of Lagos, but infrastructure. I know they're talking about the blue rail and the red rail and so on in Lagos. But that's good to hear, but that is not really enough. Mind you, Lagos, they used to brag that Lagos is the 5th or the 6th largest economy on the African continent. So if you should not be comparing Lagos with, say, my home state, Gombe. There's no basis for comparison. You claim that Lagos is as big as Ivory Coast and Ghana combined, but is Lagos better than Accra? Is Lagos better than Abidjan? So you're performing, you're punching way below your weight. And there's the need for people to realize, because anytime we compare Lagos with states like Ekiti, it seems to be exceptional. But that's the wrong comparison. There's no basis for that. So if you compare Lagos with, say, Kenya, you realize that Lagos has been poorly managed. Despite everything, it has been badly managed. And that's not limited to Lagos, even for the other states too. We have governors that don't really they don't, like my home state, the governor is talking about building a second government house. In my local government, Shangop, we don't even have a general hospital. And I know of a particular neighboring local government to my own. The general hospital is in a dilapidated state, but the priority of the governor is to build another government house. And Mr. Patrick mentioned the fact that governors will be building airports. When they have not built hospitals, they have not built schools, they have not constructed good roads. So we need to set our priorities right. And I think we have a leadership problem, and that's largely because our leaders do not prioritize the needs of the people. It seems it's about prioritizing the needs of those people in power. Sadly, that's the reality. And it doesn't tell well, and it doesn't augur well for us as an economy, as a people. When you have leaders that prioritize what they feel they will benefit personally instead of what majority of the people will benefit. All those states that have airports, how many people use the airport? In my home state, we have an airport. How many people? They cannot even take care of the airport. They ended up handing it to the federal government. So it's basically a white elephant project. We should do what we consider important. And then if you look at the second question you asked is around sustainability of debt, right? I just want to be sure.
Yes, Doc. The question is, how can debts be managed in the States?
So the debts are not sustainable. There's no wiggle room to get things done, whether at the state level or at the federal level. And government should not just, the federal system we operate is not sustainable, it's not the best. Sometimes, I know when Wike was governor of Rivers, and he took the federal government to court about the sharing of VAT revenue. And the governor of my home state came out and said, you should try to be your brother's keeper. I don't agree. We have potential to take care of ourselves. I know for now we might be doing poorly. And majority of the states in Nigeria are doing poorly. They can hardly have enough to sustain themselves. I understand. But that's largely because people have chosen not to be productive. Governors have chosen not to use their resources well. That's why we're having that problem. If everybody is going to sit up, if everybody is going to do the right things, if everybody will set their priorities right, I believe there's no single state in Nigeria that cannot have enough revenue to fund its budget or fund its development. And Lagos might be the largest economy at the moment, but there are so many states that have bigger potential than Lagos. If only they can set their priorities right, if only they prioritize the development of their own state. But so far, nobody seems to be doing that, because all we do is easy. Everybody's trying to find the easy way out. You just want to come to Abuja at the end of the month and collect your own share of the revenue. It doesn't all go well. We continue to be trading waters if that's what we continue to be doing. So there's a need for everybody to wake up. And by the way, I think I agree with the president. We should not continue to subsidize consumption. We should not continue to subsidize underdevelopment. We should not continue to subsidize laziness. I know it includes myself, including my home state, including my own local government. But if everybody will sit up, and I think Nigerians are proud people. We don't want to be dependent on others. We don't want to be freeloading. So there's a need for us to sit up. I think if that thing is done, everybody will swing to action, and then all the states will begin to generate enough revenue for themselves. And if they have any allocation from the federal government, they will make sure that they use these resources very well. But so far, I don't think we're doing that. Everybody is embarking on white elephant projects, things that do not actually redound to the benefit of the people, things that do not build the economy, things that do not bring development. So it's just so sad. And if we continue to subsidize consumption like that, I think that would likely continue. So there's a need for everybody to wake up and realize that it's way too late for you to be dependent on others. Now you need to be responsible for yourself, generate your own revenue, and use the revenue efficiently.
Because of time, we'll have to go to our last talking point, looking at Nigeria's inflation rate rising to 33.38% in October 2024, which is up from 32.7% in September 2024, as Nigerians continue to grapple with the high cost of goods and services. This, according to the National Bureau of Statistics Consumer Price Index report, attributes the rise in inflation to increased transportation costs and higher food prices. On a month basis, the headline inflation rate in October 2024 stood at 2.64%, representing a 0.12% increase from the 2.52% recorded in September 2024. This indicates that the rate of increase in the average price level in October 2024 was higher than the rate of increase observed in September 2024. We look at the rundown of the breakdown of inflation. You look at food inflation at 39.16%, increase driven by prices of items like local and foreign beer in the tobacco class, vegetable oil, groundnut oil, palm oil, fat class, beef, gizzard, dried beef products, and on and on. You look at core inflation, stood at 28.37% in October. Highest increases were observed in the price of items like bus journeys within the city, motorcycle journeys, intercity bus journeys, rents, both actual and imputed rentals under the housing category, meals at local restaurants, and services such as haircuts, women's hairbrushes, and women's hairstyle. Basically, everything we need for daily living. And finally, urban and rural inflation on a year-on-year basis. Urban inflation rate in October 2024 was 36.38%. Meanwhile, rural inflation rate in October was 31.59% on a year-on-year basis. Let me come to Patrick, looking at the inflation rate at 33.88%. How can this be tackled?
Thank you. Tackling the current inflation rate, requires a multi-pronged approach, that addresses the root cause. Because most of the time, what I've seen is we don't address the root cause in most of the challenges we have in this country. We just go for the symptoms. We don't address the root cause. And for me, it's everybody is feeling the impact of the inflation, whether you are in the mass affluent, the rich, the middle class, and the poor. Everybody is actually feeling the burns, the pain, the hurt. The only people that are not feeling it are people in government. So, but every other person who is not in government is feeling the heat. Whether you're a businessman, you are an employee, you are an employer, you are feeling the burn one way or the other. So for me, I guess the strategies for me will be divided into about two categories, which has to do with the short-term measures and also the long-term measures. And so for me, the short-term measure will just basically be food control prices. We don't have a food control. We have an agency that is supposed to be in charge of that, but they are not doing anything about it. So we need to have food control prices. then which has to do with maybe boost food production, efficient supply chain, strategic grain reserve. It should just be food control price. That's the short-term measure. Energy subsidy management. So it's another strategy that the government can put in place. Yeah, thank God for the CNG initiative that the government is trying to do. But if you want to even convert your very good CNG, you must have eaten very well before you even think in that direction. So it's not even for the mass. It's not even for the masses of the general public. It's also another big issue. Another thing is monetary policy tightening. The interest rate. They've been increasing the interest rate. Businesses can no longer survive. Businesses can no longer. They can't even go to the bank to loan money. To do their operational costs or finance their operational costs and all that. So they should also mop up the excess liquidity in the system. Then also they should target cash transfer. Yeah, we've been hearing about this target cash transfer, but we don't even know the people that are actually benefiting from this. A lot of people that I know have never one day or the other benefited from this. So how are these things done? How are the data collected to know that this is the poor of the poorest in the system? So those are for me the short-term measures that the government can. Like then when it comes to the long-term measure, they should reduce import dependency. The government should boost local production. And one thing to boost local production in this country is power. Imagine a country of over 60 years.
Now, Doctor, with food inflation at 40%, is government sensitive to this as they continue to justify economic policies? What are your thoughts?
The inflation is extremely bad, very, very bad. I'm surprised that you're saying that the president doesn't consider it important. I don't know if he has made a statement to that effect, but I know from the body language, it seems it's not a priority for him. Because if you look at the main cause of inflation is around food, and that's within the purview of the fiscal authorities. And what's the one problem that we have when it comes to food production? Insecurity. That's 100% what the government can tackle. And I know they have claimed that they are doing things, but we know in reality they are doing next to nothing that they have done that actually moves the needle for insecurity. So if you tackle insecurity, that's the number one problem. But another problem is our level of mechanization. We're still using hoes, we're still using cutlasses. Those are primitive tools. You don't use that to have enough food production for a population of more than 200 million people. So there's a need for us to mechanize agriculture. There's a need to bring improved breeds into agricultural production. And if we can do that, then the problem of food insecurity will largely be tackled. Mind you, Nigeria is one of the worst places on earth. In fact, it's the worst place on earth when it comes to affordability of food. Nigerians are affording Nigerian food now because some people start doing some analogy, putting in dollars that food is cheaper in Nigeria. No, that's not the analogy I'm making. What Nigerians, minimum wage of Nigeria is 70,000 naira. And how many, majority of Nigerians do not even have 500,000 naira in their account? How many of us even make more than that amount a month? So virtually negligible number of people. And when you compare to the prices of food, then you know that Nigerians are in trouble. Nigeria is the worst place when it comes to affordability. Then even availability, we're one of the worst places. So we're doing badly on both counts. And everything lies, it is the sole responsibility of the state to get some of these things. And the state has not done much. Last year, they declared state of emergency on food production, but they have not done anything that moves the needle. And I think it's an emergency situation. Maybe they're underestimating the problem. Somebody said anytime you complain, they shall rise. And how much rise does it even reach to the masses? And that's not even enough. That's not a sustainable solution. Fix agriculture. Because if you look at our inflation, it's largely driven by food price. So if food price can be brought down, our inflation can be brought down. And for the monetary authorities, they have been doing their best. They have been doing what conventional monetary policy advises, that you hike interest rates in a high inflationary environment. But we have not seen results, because when you hike interest rates, you're supposed to bring down money supply and ultimately inflation. Money supply has not come down. We have seen unprecedented levels of money supply. And that's because the fiscal side and the monetary side are working at cross purposes. They need to be on the same page. I know that when you hike interest rates, cost of credit will be high, it will be so harsh for businesses. But any economy anywhere in the world, if you're faced with that situation, between tackling inflation and easy credit, they'll always choose the former. You tackle inflation. Because the way inflation, and when you tackle inflation, you're not only doing a favor to consumers, you're doing a favor to producers as well. You're not only protecting the purchasing power of the consumer, you're also protecting the purchasing power of the producer. So there's a need to get our acts together. And sadly, we don't seem to be doing that. Inflation has remained unabated. Our purchasing power is completely eroded. Everybody is struggling. Everybody is gasping for breath. So it calls for emergency effort. And it's not just about paying lip service to that. We need to see concrete measures. We need to see results.
All right, good to have you back with us, Patrick. You were sharing measures with which our inflation rates can be tackled. Please go ahead. And also, what about the issue of the fuel crisis? Because the price of fuel definitely makes our products go up in price. So how do we tackle this?
So, before I actually left, I was talking about the short-term measures that the government can do, like gradual fuel subsidy reforms. Like we know, once there is an increase in fuel in this country, everything skyrockets. Because why? Everything is dependent on fuel price. It's dependent on energy price. So what I feel the government needs to do is they have to have a gradual fuel subsidy reforms. Implement targeted fuel subsidy for transportation and agricultural sector to avoid broad inflationary impact. We don't have these things. If you are increasing fuel, those in the agricultural sector should be given certain level of concession and subsidy to move their product from the farm to the entire value chain of agriculture should be given a lot of concession when it comes to transportation, especially transportation of goods, to either the market or the final destination. Then at the same time, the government also needs to promote alternative energy source, like natural gas or solar power, to reduce reliance on costly petroleum imports. So for me, like Dr. said, everything in this country is hinged on energy or fuel. Once there is an increase in that, automatically, it affects everything. Just like when this current government came into power, just the thought of him pronouncing that subsidy was gone. It was not implemented. It was just a thought of him saying it. Imagine within less than 24 hours, everything in this country skyrocketed. So that is the kind of economy and the country that we live in which we need to have energy subsidy management in such a way that this thing can be controlled and this thing can be coordinated well, so that the impact will not be felt the way people are currently feeling it right now. You go to the market, the woman that sells egg in the market will tell you that fuel has gone up. So definitely our egg price has gone up. You go there, the woman selling pumpkin will tell you that fuel has gone up. Therefore, the price of our pumpkin has gone up. Because why? All these things are tied to energy. And that energy means in terms of fuel, of moving these goods from one location to the other. So that is just my own take, that the government needs to have energy subsidy management in place, to overlook this thing and continually evaluate, not just because we are fond of just implementing things in this, coming up with policies, and we don't follow up with implementation. Even when we do implementation, we don't follow up to evaluate if this implementation actually, produce the exact result that we want. Thank you very much.
Patrick Asuma, thank you for your time. That's the much we can take on the show today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
And that's our package for today. Thank you for watching, focusing on national economy matters arising, looking at the issue of the proposed budget, and then tackling debts in states, and of course, Nigeria's inflation rate. Once again, my name is Morno Balagogo, thanking you for watching today.